Greetings, everybody. How you doing? This is your brother Sylvester Moore Eel from thctrust.org. This is going to be the third video in a series of three that deals with discharging debts, mortgages, the commercial instruments, and the credit and debit based system. Again, none of this is legal advice. I'm just sharing with you members and supporters of thctrust.org. Now, before I get started, I want to first encourage you that it's best to work on a computer. If you're doing personal status correction that deals with the trust, the UCC, will and testament, and all the things that's under the master file personal status correction menu, it's best that you work on a computer because some things are PDFs and they may not necessarily download on your smart device. However, I made the screen viewable for a smart device because I know a lot of people watch these videos on the fly, and so therefore just keep in mind that to get the best use you want to work on your computer. So also, as you guys may know, I have two different forms of subscription on the website. One is $225. That gives you at least 1 year access to all the content, all the templates, and priority access to me if you have questions that's brief and to the point. That's the two. And then the other way is $32 per month, which you can obviously do the math, is better off to just do the 225. Let's just go ahead and dive right in. So first, visit www.thctrust.org. If you haven't already done so, create an account. You would do that by going in where it says log in right here, but you will scroll down and click create an account. So those of you who have an account, go ahead and log in. And although at least half of the information in the website is free, this particular topic, we're going to go under advanced topics. So this is where you have to have a subscription. But first, I want to take a quick look at what we covered in the first video. I just want to emphasize that the most important thing under this basics page is your comprehension of Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution that requires no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. So you can, if you read, this is why it's important to click this and download all of the reference material, which is pages 1 through 50. And it'll give you an understanding of what took place from when they removed the gold and silver, which is, remember, that's constitutional, because the Constitution is the only thing you can really rely on to get things done. The Constitution is binding upon all public fiduciaries and public officers. So that's just the basis of that. That's the whole basis of HJR 192 and all of those things. And remember, we don't use HJR 192 because it has been repealed. So that's why you had to go down here and read all of these codes, statutes, policies, and laws so you could better understand how these different things apply in commerce, how we facilitate commerce. So, and I'm always adding to these codes and statutes, but that's what we went over in the first video. Again, it's really important that you click and you download so that you can be up to date and that you can keep up as we get into these more advanced topics. So then we went, in the second video, we went a little bit further. We started talking about surety bonds for the most part, because bonds are the commercial instruments that has been talked about least in this whole information movement, I guess, if you will. And bonds are actually the instruments that discharge obligations and debts. These is because our lack of bringing a bond to the transaction, we become the surety on the transaction, and we find ourselves in the slave or the debt system. So we talked about that. And for those who are interested in researching how to use bonds or other collateral, we gave these codes right here. And what I didn't talk about, which I should have talked about, was the affidavit of individual surety. But I will have that information posted on this page, and you always have to go through the statutes, the codes, and And this list, of course, will be updated. And I put these things together like this because everybody's asking, how can I get more information about bonds and discharging debts? So you have to start by reading these codes and statutes. They're going to tell you how the Treasury operates, how the Federal Reserve operates as a fiscal agent for the Treasury. That's going to tell you to research the law of agency, see what an agent is, because you have to learn how to navigate. If you are one of these people who's out here asking the bank and asking them if you can do this and if you can do that, you're never going to get anything done. You have to get into contract with these people and require them to perform. Require them to perform, but that's going to require you to know the laws that they're obligated to follow. So definitely go through the references. I put a whole bunch of PDFs here. Creditors and their bonds, Uniform Bonding Code, all about bonds, court bonds, 50 state survey on bonds. A bunch of different reading material that you can go through. Alright, so that's what we went through in the first video. And I didn't really teach anything. I just talked a little bit here and there, but I pointed you to all types of references so that you can get caught up. And now today, we're going to go into the advanced topics, and we're going to go under discharging debts. Let's look up a promise, and then we'll get cracking. Let's see what a promise is. A promise The promise is a manifestation of an intention to act or refrain from acting in a specified manner, conveyed in such a way that another is justified in understanding, that a commitment has been made, a person's assurance that the person will or will not do something. So when you deal with a promissory note, and remember, a promise is a manifestation of an intent, they write out an obligation that you intend to pay in a certain amount. They spell it out, and they write it in numbers, and they write it in words, and you sign it. You autograph it, and you become the owner. You're the owner of your signature. So what happens is you now own that debt instrument that you just created. A manifestation of your intent. So, does the Fed create money in thin air? Or do you create money in out of thin air when you sign a promissory note? Because I'm using the term money loosely and incorrectly. I should be saying what should I call it? Fiat. Well, money. Well, I don't know what you call it. Credits, debits, I don't know, but you create it out of thin air. You create it by signing notes. When you signed a promissory note, you created a debt obligation. You manifested a debt obligation, which is an account, which is, I can't think of a better word, so we're just going to call it money right now. It's not real money because we know it's not gold and silver, but it's money in the commercial system because the commercial system trades debt instruments. For example, the Federal Reserve notes, it has signatures on it too. Those signatures are also in ink, and it has the amount written in numbers as well as the amount written in words. It's a debt instrument, and it's considered money in the public, Secured parties, you understand what I'm saying. It's not money, but I'm just trying to get you to see, because a lot of people say the feds create money out of thin air. No, they sign notes, and you sign notes too, and you're the owner of your signature, which is on a manifestation of a debt instrument. So the recipient who receives your property, if they flip it over and there's no endorsement on the back, then they are said to be holding a note that's endorsed in blank. The blank endorsement means the owner of the property didn't put any type of claim or restriction on the usage of his property. So it allows the holder of the instrument to put a claim on that property. And the type of claim that they put on that property is a mortgage. But it's all set up like this, so it's not like they're really doing one on you, people expected to go and pay for the house for the next 30 years when they went to the closing. So can't necessarily say that you were defrauded. You just didn't know that there was another way. So that is basically what happens. You know, the escrow, from what I'm hearing, I don't know, I can't prove this. Now this is the part that I don't know. Maybe somebody can help me out and answer this for me. I'm being told that under the normal circumstance, when you go through the federal program and they run your credit report and they look at your numbers, how much you get paid and your taxes and all that, and then they approve you to get a mortgage, that at the time of the approval of that application, a Fed wire goes to the lender, who then has to put those finances in escrow until you close. Because when the closing occurs, everybody's going to get paid out, right? So we'll put it like this. The finances that came to the lender bank based off of the monetizing of your application or depositing it to the Treasury, because it came back from the United States government. I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from. That is the money held in the escrow to pay out everybody when closing goes through. So now, if we know the money's there, then what's actually happening to your promissory note? And what's happening to your promissory note is, as we said, you're autographing the front, which is the manifestation of an intent of that debt instrument. So you created a debt note, which is legal tender, right? Notes are legal tender in the United States, so you actually created money. But because you didn't put no restrictive endorsement on the usage of those funds, then they receive your endorsement in blank, and they put a mortgage against the property. They put a mortgage against the note, and that forces you in the debt system, because you signed the note at the closing. It's enough to stave off the present liability. It gets you through the closing. But you never fully discharged the obligation under the note, so they start sending you a bill, and you have to keep paying this bill, or have to keep paying the bill to keep the note active. They're going to sell the note at, I assume they're going to sell it to some other investor who's going to, monetize it, do however they do it, and they all collect proceeds. But the thing is, it's your principal that's being held by these investors or whatever, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, they can't perform these commercial investments and these REMICs and all of these securitizations and investing that they're doing on your note. They can't do it without you having had to pledge that collateral to back the mortgage, and without you being surety under the mortgage. And it's kind of like, the crazy thing is, people work 30 years of their life and they don't even know that all of these servicers of their loan are really so-called investors, and that they have funds that are due to them as the owner of the original property. But that's neither here nor there. So what I want to look at, and what I'm most interested in, is moving forward, knowing what we know now, how can we avoid the mortgage situation altogether, right? So your autograph on a note is a security. When you give an autograph without providing instructions via an endorsement, your endorsement is said to be in blank. It's in blank because you didn't apply your signature to the back of the instrument with payment instructions. A blank endorsement is a blanket endorsement in commerce. This allows the bank to make a mortgage claim against your property. The lender bank is the second investor and more than likely the first endorser of your note. You are the first investor. So our solution is, the first solution is, you have to be upfront when you're going to try to do something like this. You can't attempt to enter into the transaction as a debtor, which means they have to approve you to get a loan, and then in the closing you're going to flip the note over and endorse the back and shock everybody, and they're going to be stuck and not know what to do. According to the laws of commerce, I think you could do that. You have a right to discharge debt obligation. You have a right to close. However, under the law, in most states, when you're dealing with escrow, you're going to be required, and I believe it's, well, yeah, you're going to be required to give clear, concise instructions to escrow of how you intend to close the transaction. So if you have not given them instructions and then you try to do that all of a sudden, it's probably not going to work. But there's nothing wrong with being clear and concise. It just requires you to know more, because you have to be able to express the lawful transaction that you are about to do. Now, once you enter into an agreement with escrow, you got to enforce that. If they say, oh, well, I've never done that before, I've never seen that before, you know, that's not my problem. I guess you go research, or you go escalate, and you find out exactly what to do. And if they just don't know what to do, then you escalate and you research and you figure out what to do. You know, for one of the biggest things I learned in California kind of recently is I was always under the assumption that escrow officers had some type of special knowledge about depositing commercial paper and ordering Fed wires and things like that. But now I find out a lot of escrow officers just have escrow companies, but they actually have escrow accounts at Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and they don't know anything about how the Fed wires are ordered and things. The bank manager is actually the trustee on those escrow accounts. So in some cases, you may be dealing with the escrow company, but if you're trying to do a high-level secured party process, such as redeeming a note for cash, you may have to deal with the trustee on the escrow account, which is the bank officer. And to really do any of this is going to be absolutely important that you spend some time and focus on how escrow works in your state or wherever you're at. Because, for example, in California, escrow works one way in Northern California and a different way in Southern California. So you want to understand who's really the escrow agent. Is it an in-house escrow where they actually can order the Fed wires there? Or are they just, you know, really a escrow company, but all the escrow business is really done through the bank that they deal with? Because, you know, everything is, when you have the central bank, which is the Fed in the middle, they're going to bring all the banking business and escrow business. Even independent escrow sometimes are just people who have a company set up, but they just have an escrow account, and all the real escrow business is done between secured parties and the actual bankers. You know, so it's just, all I'm saying is, if you really want this to work, you want to be successful, you're going to have to know all the different elements of what needs to be done, and you're going to have to know who the escrow officer is, because the escrow officer is under federal regulations. He's got to follow 12 USC. He's got to follow 31 USC in the Treasury regulations and the operating circulars. He doesn't get a determination to say, I haven't seen this before, so I'm not going to do it. And if they do that, then you have to be able to know how to investigate, you know, who is the governing authority for the escrow officer. It may be the Department of Business Oversight in your state. It may be the commissioner of whoever. But rest assured, it's all about leverage. You know what I'm saying? So the one thing I have found is, when you start dealing with escrow and certain people that are under that deal with finances, and finances that belong to the Treasury in some instances, and they deal with taxes, it's a lot of scrutiny under their positions, and they will reluctantly follow the law every time because it's not worth their career. The issue is, sometimes you're going to have a problem getting an escrow if they see you coming, because everybody wants, it's easy to make money just dealing with sheeple, right? But the unfortunate thing is, secured parties that are not going to put ourselves into debt slavery, we still have to use these systems. So anyway, here we go. Let me see here. Now, what we're going to kind of entertain here is what the back of a 30-day promissory note would look like. The idea is, we're not putting in an application, right? So since we're not putting in an application with the lender, there will be no Fed wire to fund escrow from the application's approval or whatever, right? So we're coming with the secured promissory note. And since it's on our terms, instead of going into, and here's, I meant to say this too. When I was talking about a 30-day sentence, remember, a promissory note creates an obligation. And the first sentence is, I promise to pay the amount of something or whatever. And then it lays out the 15 or 30-year term. You see how they do the debtor? They put him in a debt sentence. They make him the surety, right? So that is a manifestation of an intent. So if you're going to do your own promissory note, our note, you know, we want to cash out in 30 days, not 30 years. Especially, so basically what we want on the front of our note is we want the instructions to hold the note, to cash the note in the escrow and let it set for 30 days. So that all the negotiation and the finalizing can happen during that 30-day period. And then on the proper date, we go to the closing and the escrow agent takes the cash, because the note has already been cashed at this point. The note was cashed when it was deposited into the escrow account. So that's the key, right? Remember, this type of transaction is something that you have to be clear with up front. You know, so it's up to you to research this well enough to know how to express this to your escrow officer. Now, I think this would start with a real estate agent. Some of y'all contact me so we could talk about this. I'm the buyer and I want to purchase a property. And I'm telling my real estate agent, hey, I'm purchasing a property. I'm gonna fund it with the secured note for 30 days in escrow. And then we're gonna cash out at the end of the 30 days. I don't think, I don't know how much he has to understand that, but somebody's got to write up the contract for you, escrow, and the seller to agree to. And that's really all it comes down to. Once it's written out and expressed in a certain way that makes sense, then you get it done. Now, usually you're going to have to fund escrow. So this is why you have to know how escrow is done. But generally your escrow agent, escrow officer will give you an account number to be funded. Typically they're expecting you to do some type of wire transfer or whatever, right? But you've already given them instructions that you're going to do a special deposit. So here's the other key. A lot of people talk about a special deposit account. I've asked banks about special deposit accounts. They don't know what I'm talking about. And I believe it's because the real term is a escrow account that receives special deposits, because that's what escrow accounts do. And this is when you have to get into your laws and statutes about the promissory notes, because this is the endorsement. Deposit to the United States Treasury, right? Because they have the obligation to redeem debts in lawful money, domestic and public debts, because they've created the inability to pay. So we deposit it to the Treasury to redeem it in lawful money. Lawful money is used between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve System. Pay the lawful money to the order of John Alex Doe for further credit to the account that needs to be funded, which is the escrow account or whatever instructions that the escrow officer gave you to fund the account. Now, it sounds crazy, but I really believe that that's all you need. I can't foresee you need any real other instructions than this. Now, what you may also need is you may need the citations beside this to support it. 12 U.S.C. 95A2, 12 U.S.C. 411. And that's why you have to go through those other two videos. I cited a whole bunch of laws that you would look at. Okay? Now, we get the signature here. And then notice what's very important. We have the trustee or the trust relationship. We're demonstrating that this is the trust secured party holding the estate. This is who's the owner of the property, right? The trustee is treated as the owner of the property by Doe L. trustee under agreement with John Alex Doe. And then we have our 98 series tax ID number. Now, this is important because now somebody may be thinking, well, how can this work if you don't have a bond in with the Treasury? You're not a secured party creditor. Great question. I believe having a bond in with the Treasury and all that stuff could help, but is it necessary to purchase a house and cash a promissory note? I don't think so. The escrow officer, when you enter into closing, he's going to tell you how much needs to be paid, how much needs to go into escrow to close the transaction. So once you get that disbursement as a Fed wire, and the only way you're going to do that is to special deposit the note, and maybe you won't have no issues, or maybe you have to explain to the trustee why he's required to do it. Remember, he's a fiscal agent. He works for the Treasury. He doesn't get to make a determination, especially because of the capacity that he's operating in, because you're doing a real estate settlement and closing, right? But according to what I'm reading, the escrow officer, maybe the bank, maybe the trustee at the bank, or maybe the escrow company that you're dealing with, on your behalf is required to record a 1099-S. And this is how the reporting begins with the IRS. But you are supposed to treat that $400,000 as income. So it's almost as if anybody can cash a note. It's like getting the money up front, but you have to add it as income. And of course, if they want you to treat it as income, that means the IRS is going to tax it. So some people may say, well, this is a good thing still, because I can just go out and purchase a property, tender a promissory note, cash it, special deposit in escrow, pay out the seller and everything else, and then get hit with the tax liability for having received income. I would suggest, I would guess the tax liability could be 30%, 40%, 60%. I don't really know. And I think this could be a good thing if if you're like, I can deal with the tax liability later, or it might be cheaper to do business that way than it is to get into a 30-day loan or 30-day mortgage. So it's just something to look at. Or the other thing is, if it's a secured note, for example, most promissory notes that you see are not necessarily secured, or and when I say secured, I mean they're backed up by a bond or another asset. So let me scroll down here real quick. Actually, before we read about the surety bond to insure the note, right? And actually, if you read, I think I read it in the 1099-S instructions. I think that's where I read it. But I believe if you tender an instrument like this and you create, or you manifest cash like that and it's treated as income, I believe if you don't pay it back or something like that, the IRS taxes you at 75% of it. I think I read something like that. I'm not sure. But the thing that I'm saying is, it seems that you don't have to go into any kind of slave cycle or debt cycle to pay this back if you make it a bonded promissory note, whereas you create a bond. So what happens is you special deposit, present the note in escrow, it cashes the note. Now the funds are held in that escrow account for 30 days waiting for the closing. But if you've written a 30-day note, then at the end of those 30 days, you want to cash that note, ledger the outstanding liabilities and obligations of that note against the asset. And this is where we're going to go into next, which is the bond that you want to have on deposit, or the asset, or any other collateral that's acceptable and sufficient to cover the liabilities that you just created when you manifested money with the promissory note. So does anybody see where this is going yet? You manifest the promissory note in the public and you ledger it against your bond with the full faith and credit. Now I think you can do this at the same time via Treasury Direct. So let me see what I have here. My research indicates that the best approach for discharging a mortgage is to issue a bond. What I'm saying is you can create a surety bond attached to your full faith and credit certificate of live birth and deposit it in Treasury Direct. Or what I would do instead of doing that, is just create the affidavit of individual surety attached to the full faith and credit and deposit it in Treasury Direct alongside of, with a copy of the promissory note that you tendered into the public, because that is going to be the asset that you're going to ledger this note against to discharge it in full acquittance. So the thing about a Treasury Direct account, if you don't know, I could call Treasury Direct on Monday, or I could go online and set up a Treasury Direct account and they'll give me the account number. So now they're expecting me to send them my trust instrument along with the asset or the collateral to be on deposit in that account. That's been my experience. I know it's not being represented and taught that way, but this is, I'm just dealing with experience and a lot of research. Again, none of this is legal advice, just kicking back some information back and forth. I hope this was helpful because I kind of feel like I didn't deliver it the way I really wanted to deliver it. I feel like it's just so much information that I just couldn't get it all in one simple flow through. Right? So, yeah. So you're going to have to backward study some of the things I was talking about. Okay? He said open up a Treasury Direct account, full faith and credit as the asset to ledger against the promissory note that we're going to float in escrow for 30 days to cash out and pay the seller. Right? So just think about that. Put it all together. Now, your brother, Sylvester Moore Eel, this is what I'm really trying to do. So I'm really ready to buy a property. I'm not trying to do this for show or whatever. This is an entitlement. This is a right. And I'm ready to buy a property. So inshallah, I have the opportunity and I'll put my best foot forward.